Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody. Bill, you missed out on movements on the matometer. This should be a daily tracking of my tweets, columns, and TV appearances, not a weekly check-in, because Trump has sort of spanned the spectrum and come back to near Reagan levels.
Well, I was actually going to say because we can talk about this a little bit later, but you had a piece after the travel ban protest talking about the consternation that you heard amongst your own church members, and I thought,
Yeah.
wow, that Matt's going down to Mussolini on the Lewisometer here. I mean, Matometer's better. But then Supreme Court pick, boom, you're all the way back over to Reagan.
I know it's been a whirlwind week, and I feel like if we just check in once a week, you're not going to get an accurate reading. It's not going to be as interesting. I used to do a thing.
In between these two events, there's this David Brooks column in the Times talking about how Republicans have made a Faustian bargain. Deal with the devil to swallow all of Trump's authoritarianism in order to get their other policy goals. Does that interfere with the manometer at all?
No, first of all, I don't want to track. Well, I don't want to track. Okay, so number one, I don't want to track with anybody, whether it's David Brooks or David Frum. I want to be I want to have my unique take and sort of where my gut really is. I wonder, look, I don't think we should be doing this based on a career trajectory, but I do wonder about the value of being a conservative columnist who, from day one, writes off Trump. George Will, as you saw, lost his, or was not renewed as a Fox contributor. This Donald Trump just picked what could be if you're a conservative, a great Supreme Court justice who could be the, Scalia 2.0, who could serve for another 30 or 40 years. So, I mean,
you are feeling it.
Well, I just think it's premature for some of these people. That column, it's so funny that David Brooks column looks so much worse 24 hours later. I mean, when it published, the morning it published, people were probably like, "Yeah, that's," and now it just anyway.
But I don't think it's mistimed. I mean, I think the point was, yeah, there's going to be some good stuff conservatives are going to get out of this, but what is the cost? I mean, is that the kind of thing you want to be looking over as you are in your Gorsuch groove to maybe take a breather and say, is this worth the deal?
Yeah, but I think his assumption or the premise, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't read the piece, partly because I don't want to be, I read an excerpt of it that Tegan Goddard put up, and I saw the tweets, but yeah, I sometimes I intentionally shield myself from stuff so that I don't have it mess up my thinking and my writing. Sometimes you want to be influenced, and sometimes you want to not be influenced. But and I don't want to sound like other conservative columnists, for one thing. But my sense is that his premise is that Trump is so bad and so toxic that that nothing will outweigh it. And I'm not convinced that is right. I mean, like I say, a Supreme Court pick is a lifetime appointment. Donald, we're going to talk later maybe about my Daily Beast piece. I'm not an expert on regulations, but I did a pretty extensive deep dive into it, and he had this executive order. I mean, Donald Trump could be the guy who actually shrinks government and takes on the administrative state, the so-called deep state, in a way that even Reagan couldn't do. Reagan rolled back the Soviets. He could not roll back government. And so I just think it's premature for these people to do it. And there's several of them, the David Brookses, the George Wills. I think there might be room for one guy, for one Evan McMullin, but I just don't know if you're going to day in and day out approach this Republican presidency with an inherent assumption that it is going to end badly, that it's going to be bad. I just don't know how much value you can deliver as an alternate voice. I mean, I try to approach I try to assume that this could go either way. I think I've always thought that there's a huge spectrum of possibility for Trump, a huge risk reward. And I wasn't willing to take the risk of the downside, but now that we're in it, I think we need to be honest and fair about it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. That's why the matometer, will have these ebbs and flows.
So let me get into your Daily Beast piece before we go deeper into Gorsuch. So you wrote about your Sunday school session.
Yes.
Where
yes.
At your Virginia church. How would you describe the church? Is it an evangelical church? Is it non-denominational? How would you characterize it?
It's technically a Southern Baptist. It's technically part of the Southern Baptist Convention. It doesn't feel like a Southern Baptist church. The first preacher, the founder of the church, was actually murdered by the Confederacy for starting a school for freed people. So right away, it starts off different than the stereotypes about Southern Baptist churches. And I try to go to what's called the contemplative service. There are many different services. You can have a different sort of experience depending on your wants and needs. I go to this contemplative service where the people wear robes and there's a lot of incense and candles and chanting and Gregorian chants and stuff like that. That's what the church service is like. Now I go to this intergenerational service, Sunday school class, which is different than the actual preaching. That's in a musty basement room. I think the average age there has to be 70. And there's a lot of prayers in that service because a lot of people are fighting off serious illness right now, are dealing with it. And I tried to write it to provide, and Bill, you sort of gave me a little encouragement to do this, to write this piece when I bounced it off you. But I was actually happy my preacher somehow, independently of me, never told him about it, read the piece, emailed me, thanked me, said he liked it, and I was a little bit nervous because is it cool to write about stuff that happens in your church experience? I tried to not betray any confidences or anything like that, but what I think this piece did was really demonstrate how in this church, I would say Donald Trump would win. If there was an election held there, Donald Trump would probably win the election. But it's much more a John Kasich. I would say it's a John Kasich, Merrick Garland kind of place. It's sort of that's more the vibe.
But in that piece, you're basically saying, not just taking the temperature of the room, but also I think in your own mind that the travel ban is antithetical to Christianity in its negative attitude about refugees. That's a pretty. Am I mischaracterizing what you said?
Well, yeah, but that's okay. I'm not intentionally, and maybe it's because I didn't, present it correctly. So first, I would say, it's a semantic thing, but I don't think it's. Some people call it a Muslim ban. I don't think that's true because it only affects 7 countries, and so you could be Islamic from Turkey and come here, and so you're not banned. It's not banned based on religion solely. It's based on the country. We can quibble over that. It's also a ban. I think there's I think when people say ban, they hear sort of indefinite, but except for Syria, it's like a 90 or 120 day pause. Obviously, the implementation, which I think was not just incompetence or sloppiness, but also maybe by design, or at least willful, just not caring by Steve Bannon. But I think that was really problematic. You had these images, so it was like Friday and Saturday. You had all these images of people, protesters at airports. You had stories of people who were translators who had been helping America, who were being detained, who couldn't get into the country, who in some cases maybe even being turned away, green card holders. So this is the context of which I went to church on Sunday, and the so it's not specifically. I would say that that's the context, but it's not specifically Donald Trump versus Christianity. It's generally how should we feel about immigrants and refugees. And on one hand, I had a guy who goes to my Sunday school class who's struggling with cancer right now. He's in, he's actually in the middle of it, of chemo, and he's a Marionite guy from Lebanon, and he basically, his philosophy is like, these people, Muslims, specifically Muslims, are not consistent with what we are. They want to kill us, and we have to like basically do everything we can to keep that from happening. Now you have to contrast that with what a lot of other people said, including my pastor, who basically said, a lot of the Bible, maybe like a quarter of the Bible, is about refugees and migrants, and he just happened to be preaching, not intentionally. We're on a series. He was preaching about Daniel, who, this is the Babylonian captivity, King Nebuchadnezzar, but of course he talked about from Moses to the Good Samaritan. There's plenty of Bible verses about how you're supposed to treat the foreigner, the stranger in your country, the compassion. So I really feel like there was a clash amongst Christian conservatives between our sort of tribalism and self-preservation versus what we're actually supposed to believe. And I think that there is some discordance, and I think that this is something that Christians who take their faith seriously are really struggling with and wrestling with. And I tried to capture that in this piece without. I tried not to put my thumb on the scales too heavily in either way. But when you're citing Bible verses that basically talk about welcoming strangers into your that tends to be dispositive.
Well, so you're still saying there that the basic attitude of turning your back on refugees conflicts with Scripture, correct?
Well, I would definitely say that that Christians, my understanding would be that Christians should be welcoming, generous, kind, compassionate. But I don't think that's a suicide pact either. I think that look, obviously governments have to do some things that we don't necessarily want to know about or too much, how the sausage gets made. So they need to vet to keep us safe. But when we're wrestling with this tension between security, keeping Americans safe versus like, what do we stand for? Who are we as a country? It gets messy.
But I think, as you know, we already vet. We vet a ton. Yeah. It takes years to get in as a refugee. You have Republicans citing what Obama did in 2011. That, of course, was not a total pause or a ban. There was a specific instance of two people that did slip through. So they said, okay, it was specific to Iraq. Okay, let's slow down the Iraq process and find out what happened here. They did it, and then we're back to where we were. This is much cruder, not based on any specific incident. Instead, Trump cites incidents that did not involve refugees to issue a blanket.
Not refugees from these 7 countries.
Well, not refugees at all.
Oh, yeah.
San Bernardino, Orlando, these things did not involve refugees.
Okay. But, anyway, we can get into them. But, no, I would just say my goal with this column, most of the time when you write a column, you want to have a strong perspective and you want to prove that thesis. My point in this column was because I think my church is a microcosm in fact, I think I was the first to sort of write this column, and then some other people wrote similar ones later. But it was to talk about this struggle and this debate, not to strongly come down on one side or the other, but to kind of leave people to think about this, because I think it deserves some thought. What kind of country do we want to be?
Right. So as that tension is going on, there's at least a part of the Christian conservative community that's saying, I'm not so sure about this. This doesn't feel like it complements my understanding of the Bible.
Yeah. So the matometer, if we had taped this a few days ago, the matometer would not have been where it is. Like right now, it is erect. The matometer is, I don't know. We haven't figured out the directions, but the matometer is straight ahead with Gorsuch. But
looking at Gorsuch from a Christian conservative perspective, I mean, there's obvious things. You know, he has cited religious liberty principles in opposing the Affordable Care Act's coverage of birth control, employer mandate on that. I believe he was critical about gay marriage rulings, if I remember correctly. And he had the whole book about euthanasia. He's opposed to a legal right to euthanasia. So I understand why a Christian conservative would like that. But is it such a zero-sum game where you say, well, I got 3 check marks here, but I lost 1 check mark over here with the refugee thing. Three beats 1. I like where this is going. I mean, is it that linear, or is there aspects here where even one heavy negative check mark really has got to make you pause?
Well, okay. I don't know where to begin with this one. I guess, how would I put this? I think that part of I think that there are issues where it's like I don't define myself as a Christian conservative. But I think that there certainly are areas where if you're a person of faith, that really takes the forefront, right? So I feel like this issue of about how we treat refugees and immigrants, like there's a moral component to that that's really hard to sort of put on the back burner. It's like an obvious issue, I think. Whereas my take on Supreme Court justices, and this will probably sound like a cop-out, but they're really supposed to interpret the law, and I do like the adherence to the strict, constructionist interpretation. So for me, I think that there are a lot of cases where you say this is what I believe, but where it doesn't impact politics as directly. I'm probably not expressing this quite well. Is that obvious to me when I look at this appointment? I don't immediately think about faith or religion or anything like that. I think, is he going to interpret, the Constitution?
So let's shift into the more terrestrial realm of politics and Gorsuch. So the
down
big
in the dark,
debate,
unseemly, messy. Okay.
So the big debate on the left, of course, is how hard do you fight this? Obviously, very few want to vote for him, but do you take it as far as trying to filibuster it, which brings with it the chance that Republicans would do the so-called nuclear option and end the filibuster option for Supreme Court justices. As you know, Democrats in 2013 used a form of the nuclear option and scrapped filibusters for lower court appointments and for executive branch appointments, so that is still in effect. They did not scrap the filibuster for Supreme Court and for legislation. So there is one school of thought that, look, this sucks. They stole us from Merrick Garland. They did not play above board last year, but this doesn't tip the balance of the court. It's replacing Scalia. It's status quo from a year ago. Don't force Republicans or compel Republicans to scrap the filibuster on this. Let's play for time and really have it out if Kennedy resigns or if Ginsburg or Breyer resign or die, and that seat is open. Let's go all out for that one. I think the counter argument would be, what's the difference? If the assumption is Republicans are going to scrap it eventually anyway, why not have it out now? And even if you got lucky and Trump didn't get a second pick, at the next pick, Democrats would have it, and they would benefit from not having the Supreme Court filibuster. So what are you really losing if you force the issue right now? And there's also the chance that 3 Republicans don't want to scrap the filibuster. You need all the Republicans to basically agree. Susan Collins has already said she doesn't want to scrap the filibuster. You need 2 more. McCain's an institutionalist. Graham's an institutionalist. You got 2 blue state Republican senators and Dean Heller and, you already got Collins. Oh, I'm sorry, you have Dean Heller and Michael Bennet from Colorado and Heller from Nevada. So there's a chance you could fight to the hilt, and those 3 Republicans wouldn't play along with McConnell. So I sort of lean towards Democrats, fighting it out full court press. Now, you got a handful of Democrats who have indicated otherwise, and several of them are in Trump states. So you may not have 41, but
I think I heard last I heard there are 7 Democrats who have said they won't filibuster. They won't support. So one more.
If it stays, one more, right? You need one more to actually not be able to filibuster.
You could invoke cloture, and it's done. So you wouldn't even, you wouldn't need the nuclear option. You could just invoke cloture the old-fashioned way.
But if you were a Democrat, what would be the right advice to take? Should they filibuster to the bitter end, or should they grit their teeth and let this one go?
That's a tough question. I've not tried to put myself in their shoes. I mean, they are squeezed because they literally don't have any leverage.
Well, they have some leverage. I mean, they can filibuster and could potentially get a few Republicans to not scrap the filibuster. I mean, it's not zero leverage.
All right, they've got very little leverage. They don't have much leverage. I mean, they don't control their own destiny, right? It's like a football team going into the playoffs where you're like, well, if the Lions lose and the Giants tie against New England, then that's kind of, they need the perfect storm. But sometimes, and I think Steve Bannon is a fan of what I call chaos theory, if you make things happen, then you don't, like you were saying, right? So if you sort of game this out, Democrats could force an internecine fight on the right where John McCain and Mitch McConnell were fighting. And where everybody turned, McCain's not up for another 5 years, so 6 years, so it doesn't matter. But if Republicans had a chance to get this Supreme Court justice confirmed, and John McCain and Lindsey Graham decided, and Susan Collins, whoever, decide not to do it on principle to preserve this, archaic, sort of Senate rule, protocol. Tradition, then you would have, you would have, all hell would break loose. So I would say that on one hand, if you're Joe Manchin and you live in West Virginia, if you're Heidi Heitkamp and you live in North Dakota, if you're Claire McCaskill and you live in Missouri, filibustering a well-qualified nominee may not be good politics. If you're Joe Manchin, probably not good politics in West Virginia. I think Trump won that state pretty big. On the other hand, in terms of the national base, if you have big aspirations, I think Democrats are where Republicans were for a decade, which is, but he fights. They want a fighter, whether it matters or not. They want someone who will fight. And now they will do what Republicans for a long time sort of lionized, like Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid. They're real fighters, not our guys. Mitch McConnell's a P word. You know what I mean? Paul Ryan's, a pansy. But Nancy Pelosi, and so I think we're seeing like the Democrats are now in that camp where they're like, why can't you fight like Mitch McConnell? The way he denied Merrick Garland, that's what we need. We need to be like them. So this is a long way of me saying I think that there's cross pressures here. It's not clear. What do you think, Bill? What would you advise?
Well, McConnell fought to the hilt, and what were blue state Republicans are now mostly red state Republicans. So I think there was a fear that what he was doing was
I was told that Mitch McConnell rolled over and gave Democrats everything they wanted and never fought at all.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure that's accurate, but I mean, there's this little Merrick Garland thing that some people are bringing up these days, and I'm very sympathetic to the red state Dem plight. And I think it's very easy for a guy like me to be on a blue state bar stool and say you should fight to the hilt. And who cares if you lose re-election? I obviously would rather. Well, what's that?
Yeah, from the bar stool in Northampton, right?
Right.
Safely ensconced, yeah.
Right. I mean, and people in blue areas should at least acknowledge you'd rather have a squishy blue Democrat in a red state than a hardcore red Republican in a red state. So you got to give those guys some latitude. I do think, though, that there is a path for a red state Dem to play the centrist card and say it is abominable what Republicans did to Merrick Garland. That was a straight and narrow down the middle pick that they refused to give a hearing to. We need this seat on the court to be someone in that mold who is a consensus choice. And I'm not going to allow a pick that's going to upset that balance go through. And so I'm going to filibuster until we can come together around a consensus choice. So it's not casting a lot and saying we need to have a left-wing pick. It's trying to play national healer. I think that's probably the only way that a red state Dem could join with Schumer on that. And I understand if they don't want to do that. And it may be that Schumer could let 7 of them go and still hold the filibuster. I think it would be a stronger filibuster if it had that centrist sheen to it, though.
Well, there's not enough leverage to negotiate. It's either, in my opinion, it's either you fight a symbolic battle that you will lose, or you acquiesce. There will be no negotiation.
Most likely, you're going to lose. But
right.
I mean, there's 100% chance of losing to acquiesce.
Right, and then the question becomes the cost benefit analysis.
Right. I've argued this in the Bush days. I argued it very strenuously in the Bush days with Roberts and Alito. Where I said, look, I'm not even saying that you have to block these guys by filibustering necessarily. You probably don't have the numbers for that, but at least make your case, clearly and fervently. Draw those battle lines. Make clear to the wider public what the Democratic vision of the judiciary is. So when these guys Republicans get picked and they take the court in a far right direction, you've made clear what the alternative is.
No, I would agree. I would definitely agree with that. Yeah.
So if you had a filibuster that was, a red plus blue Democratic filibuster that was said, this is designed to get us to a consensus choice and reunify the country, and Republicans snub that's a good way to lose. I think it's even a better way to lose than, we don't like your right-wing pick, we want to have a left-wing pick. I mean, it's obviously not going to say it in those terms, that could easily be interpreted that way. I think you want to hold on to Merrick Garland and say, a consensus pick is what's desired by most Americans. We're fighting for that, and if you don't give us that, you know where these people stand.
No, I think that's, it's one thing to vote against the nominee. It's another thing to try to filibuster the nominee to avoid a up or down vote in the Senate. So, I think that's perfectly fine to vote against and make the case. And I don't see much of a downside to doing that. But just let me say real quick, Bill, I should have said this before. I mean, this goes without saying. I'm not the first to say this. It's not an original thought, but this goes into the matometer. I mean, Donald Trump could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue today, and this pick covers a multitude of sins. Conservatives are, taught from the time we're knee high that it's all about Supreme Court picks. And so Donald Trump delivered on this priority. This is why a lot of people held their nose and voted for him to begin with. And he did it. He delivered. And that covers a multitude of sins.
I understand the politics of that. I mean, obviously, Trump won. He kept the conservative base with him with promises like that, and I understand delivering on those promises to keep the base in line. But I do find it a little strange that a guy who has often sold himself as not a traditional Republican, not ideological, would do something so conventional as pick a conservative intellectual from a circuit court. You might think Trump would do something splashier, zanier, totally out of the box, scramble the court, someone who doesn't even fit on a normal liberal conservative spectrum.
Kid Rock.
Right. I mean,
yeah, I don't do a good impersonation, but you could get where this is going. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you might think he'd do something like that. I mean, this is, in a sense, normal. The admirable part was blocking Garland without a hearing.
Well, I think part of it is that I think Trump somehow understood, what he needed to do. In other words, he understood how to appeal to these, disaffected working class white voters out there that no one else knew how to appeal to. I think he saw what he needed to do just enough to keep the conservatives, the intellectual, philosophical conservatives on board. And what they really care about is Supreme Court picks. And so he went to the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation and came up with this list. And he's pretty much right that he can do all sorts of other things. But if he gets that right and delivers on that promise, he he can have this. I mean, I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's good, but they're going to look the other way on this $1 trillion infrastructure bill. You know what I mean? If he delivers, and the promises of 100 federal judgeships that don't require a supermajority, and maybe another 1 or 2 Supreme Court justices in the next couple of years, depending on how things shake out.
Right. It's certainly canny. Look, only ideological bases care about the court. Most Americans don't as much in the broad middle. And to throw the right this bone, it's a big bone and it keeps them in line. So I totally get that. But I think it should be a signal to everybody else that for all the talk about upending Washington and changing all this stuff, a lot of what's happening here is pretty run-of-the-mill conservatism, which a lot of folks have not liked, and it might be done with a zany overlay that feels very disruptive. But there's a lot going on here that's just the usual stuff.
This isn't. There are 2 Donald Trumps, and there are 2 Donald Trump camps. I said the other day on CNN. Sometimes the right hand doesn't know what the far right hand is doing, which is sort of an old quip. Some people said it came from the West Wing. I guarantee it's been around a lot longer than that. So on one hand, you've got this Donald Trump making this great Supreme Court pick. Marco Rubio could have made this pick. Ted Cruz could have made this pick. And you've got, the cabinet, which is by and large great, which could have been picked by Scott Walker or something, right? So that's super reassuring. And it's like, wow, we held our nose. I didn't, but we held our nose and voted for this guy, and he delivered. On the other hand, you've got the other Donald Trump administration, which is a Steve Bannon, Stephen Miller administration that wrote this executive order on and I'm going to use the term travel ban with some air quotes. And I think it's a tale of 2 administrations. I mean, I think that that's the fringe. What we saw with the Supreme Court pick is the mainstream conservative pick that Marco Rubio could have done. And what we saw with the travel ban is a different part of the administration, the other right hand. And so I think that there's a conflict right now. This is a discordance within the administration, and which of these 2 will prevail. And right now it depends on the issue. And according to some people, it depends when Jared Kushner celebrates the Sabbath. Have you seen this, Bill?
I have not.
A couple people out there who were noticing that, was it Shabbat? Is that what it's called? I don't roll on. Yeah. That's when the Big Lebowski, John Goodman doesn't bowl on after sundown, right? So, right. So people have noticed that Donald Trump's kookiness comes out as soon as Jared Kushner goes dark. It's sort of a weird theory. I don't necessarily think it's true, but it's an interesting observation. That as soon as Kushner's off the grid, the bad Trump comes out to play.
Maybe. I'm curious to see, as canny as Trump has been in keeping the right happy, stuff like the Holocaust statement is designed to drive Jewish Americans over the edge.
I have no idea why you would do what they did. That not mentioning Jews or anti-Semitism in a Holocaust statement, and there's no way that was an oversight. The first thing you would do is pull up what every other president, or just go to Reagan. What did he say? I mean, this is an obvious omission. So that's trouble.
And they didn't even treat it like an oversight. They've defended it as intentional.
Well, it depends It depends if you're going to which part of the Trump administration is defending it. I mean, Reince Priebus, who's on the sane, normal sort of conservative wing of the Trump administration, his defense is, well, of course, we Jews were, targeted in the Holocaust. And of course,
he didn't say it was an oversight that it wasn't in there. He was just saying, oh, it's implicit. We all know
right.
Jews.
Yeah, but I think that's different than saying, well, yeah, but everybody was impacted, and there were gypsies.
That's a pretty small distinction there, I gotta say.
Well, I'm just saying. My point here is that I do think that like if you're a conservative who held your nose and voted for Trump, there is cause for celebration, and there is cause for concern. But I think that the Supreme Court pick is an overwhelming. If it's sort of a scale and we're balancing like these things, like I think the Supreme Court pick tips the scales in a pretty big way, and will pacify a lot of people for a long time.
One last question before we call it a day.
And by the way, who's making this matometer graphics? Have we?
I need some poster board to hold up. I haven't gotten to it yet.
Oh, you're going to do a Carl? How about like a dry erase board, like a Carl?
Right. I need something like that.
So we're not going to tap our extensive design team.
If someone there with graphic design wants to do a graphic that we can put on the DMZ show Twitter feed every day, I will happily do that.
Something where we could go in like Cold Fusion and the WordPress or something and update the matometer would be. If you're going to do some programming, let's do that.
You just need like 6 different graphics to show each setting. You don't get complicated.
But don't you think there's like degrees where it could be between? Or will it be like you've got to be on Mussolini or Jimmy Carter?
Yeah, you're too nuanced, man. You gotta pick your presidents, and you got and plant your flag.
Right.
But
that's easy then. All we need is like so what. So you got Mussolini, you got Carter, you got Reagan. Who else is on
I think we need for those. I think you need Mussolini. I think Mussolini, Nixon, Harding, Carter, T.R., Reagan.
Okay.
Maybe need one more sort of slightly positive one in there. Maybe need Coolidge.
Well, let's throw it out to the wisdom of the...
Maybe T.R. Coolidge, Reagan.
Okay. I don't know if he's ever going to get... Although Coolidge was a protectionist. This could get very confusing, but okay. Let's throw it out there, people. I'd like this on my desk first thing in the morning. Okay.
Maybe you don't need Nixon and Harding. I think you need one scandal-ridden president.
I think it has to be Nixon. Nobody knows. Was Harding Teapot Dome? What is that?
I feel like Teapot Dome is the exact kind of scandal we're going to see.
But nobody knows it. I think you got to go Nixon.
All right. So Mussolini's your fascist. Nixon's your scandal-ridden.
Yeah, we're not going to go we're not going to go Hitler. We'll go Mussolini.
Yeah, right.
We're not going to be ridiculous.
Carter's your incompetent. I think it's unfair, but obviously with the impression. TR is your successor Republican, but who doesn't care about constitutional boundaries. And then Reagan is your ultimate.
He's Reaganing today, Bill.
Right.
Just like he was last week when we did this.
Reaganing is a 24-hour thing, Reaganing is not just a one-off thing. You got to Reagan for a full 24 hours with no mistakes.
Well, okay. I think it's been, if you count the time, I think because it was down to Hardiman or Gorsuch.
Didn't he already defend the travel ban today? Does it already violate the Reaganing?
We're going to call this a pause, a temporary pause on from 7 specific countries. So, but anyway, again, a multitude of sins, Bill. A multitude. I
want to ask you one last question about Gorsuch, though.
All right.
I mean, and to the larger question, why the right cares so much? I think the left cares a lot for reasons that are somewhat unrealistic. I mean, I think people just sort of want the court to do what they want to do. I want you to codify into law the things that I like, whereas that's not really what the court is supposed to be there for. So, I mean, is it that? Is it deep down? I can't wait for the court to overturn Roe v. Wade. And if I don't get that, then I'm mad. Or is it really, I just want a strict interpretation of the Constitution, and I understand that doesn't mean I always get what I want. I just want to see our government properly constrained by the boundaries that our founders set. And therefore, whatever he specifically rules on, I'm okay with that because the general principle is going to be in effect. I mean, which do you think it really is?
Well, look, there's always like the good reason and the real reason. So you could say there's a principled reason that we say, and then there's like the realpolitik reason. But look, I think it's actually it's become like a legend that no longer even. So I could just say that literally my entire life, it's been about the courts, and it's not. So it started with it probably starts with the Warren Court, and then it goes to Roe versus Wade. Then it goes to stealth nominees like Souter, and it goes to the borking of Robert Bork, and it goes to the allegations against Clarence Thomas, which by the way is the first thing that turned Andrew Breitbart into a conservative, or started the wheels turning for that evolution. And so this is like fairy tale is the wrong word. When we tell ourselves, like, this is like, an inherited story, narrative of the courts. And every single election in my entire life, even if it was like, not really the most important election in history, we're always told it is, because the next president's going to get X number of Supreme Court justices, and those are lifetime appointments. So this is really drilled into your head. And it is sort of left to you then, there's no good reason, which is we need people who will, just textualists, who will interpret the Constitution as the founders intended, or it could be because we need to overturn Roe versus Wade, we need to defend the Second Amendment, whatever it is. But the legend, that's the word I was searching for. The legend actually transcends the actual, like, thing, if that makes sense. Like this has become the holy grail on the right. And don't get me wrong, I think we would all agree that courts are very important, but it goes back to a sense that at some point traditional Americans lost the culture, and some of that is really hard to take back. How do you take over the entertainment world, Hollywood, the music industry? That's really tough to do. But the idea of unelected judges deciding you can't pray in school, deciding it's okay in 50 states to abort your unborn child, like that is something that we can comprehend and plausibly stop. And so,
but of course, you're having unelected judges stop Obamacare or stop the Clean Power Plan. I mean, everyone likes unelected judges to do something that fits with their policy goals.
But in fairness, the Clean Power Plan is implemented by unelected EPA bureaucrats. That was
based on the Clean Air Act, which passed by Congress, which the Supreme Court upheld in 2006. But go on.
Based on their interpretation, and by the way, I would say one of the things that this new Supreme Court justice has going for him is this thing called Chevron deference, right, which, without getting too much in the weeds, he would allow Congress, not the agencies, to sort of interpret what those rules should be.
Well, let's leave it on that note. You have to jump. Right. I have to jump. The manometer is firmly on Reagan today. Where will it be next week? Nobody knows. So tune in then to find out here on the DMZ.
All right, guys. Thank you, Bill. Check us out at DMZ Show. Check out Matt Lewis in the News podcast. Read Bill and Politico Magazine and Real Clear Politics. Check out my Daily Beast column. And Bill, what's the name of the podcast?
Mine is This Is Not Normal. We should have a new one up at the end of this week.
All right. See you guys. Thanks, Bill.
Take care.